In this video, we'll be looking at the best and worst seats in economy class. The seat you choose can make or break your trip, especially in coach. Just imagine having no legroom and the person in front of you reclining into your lap for 12 hours straight. Nobody wants that kind of thing, and that's exactly what we're going to make sure you avoid ever having to experience again here. Now, when it comes to picking economy seats, there's one big thing that people just can't agree on. Is the aisle or the window seat the best? I do happen to believe that there's a clear better choice here, but first let's compare the two. When it comes to choosing a window seat, there are a handful of upsides. One big one that I hear a lot is that it gives you a sense of privacy. By picking a window seat, you get the feeling of being kind of off to the side. I definitely wouldn't go as far as saying you get real privacy on a full economy flight, but nobody will bump into you while walking by and you only have one seat neighbor. And then the ability to lean against the window definitely has some value. Some people might say it's easier to sleep there, but honestly, if you're flying in economy class, just don't expect to get any quality rest on a plane. And then there's the control aspect of choosing a window seat. By sitting in the window seat, you become the chosen one, meaning that you have the control of opening or closing the window shade. And of course, if you're not sitting in the window seat, you don't have that control. And that gets to my personal biggest positive of choosing a window seat. Having the window seat right next to you means you have unlimited access to amazing views during the whole flight. As a content creator, I really value being able to film from the window too. But even if you just enjoy watching the landscapes pass by, this is definitely a big benefit to choosing a window seat. But window seats do come with a few downsides too. It's usually going to be harder to do much moving around when you're seated in a window seat. It might feel a little cramped. And getting up or sitting down requires disturbing your seatmates, which means that it's less convenient to get up and use the restroom. Plus, on longer flights, it's nice to be able to get up every few hours and stretch your legs. So sitting in a window seat does make this a little bit more of a hassle. And while it's definitely a positive to have access to the window shade, sitting in a window seat might mean that the crew will disturb you every now and then to open or close your window shade. In my view, that's not really a big deal, but it definitely wouldn't happen if you were seated in a different seat. So it's looking like the positives do outweigh the negatives when it comes to choosing window seats, but let's see how aisle seats compare. The biggest positive to choosing an aisle seat is probably the ability to get up and move around whenever you feel like it without disturbing anybody. Want to stretch your legs? Really thirsty but don't want to think about what happens next? Well, you'll definitely get easier access to the restroom without having to ask for others to move. And then some people see the ability to stretch their legs out into the aisle as a benefit of choosing an aisle seat. So technically you could say that an aisle seat has more legroom, but I personally find it just a little bit annoying when people stretch their legs out into the aisle. And I don't really see the benefit when I'd have to move my legs every time somebody wants to walk by. And one other upside to choosing an aisle seat would mean that you can leave the plane slightly earlier than somebody who chose a window seat. But let's look at the downsides of choosing an aisle seat. First off, one is really obvious. You're going to miss all those great views from the window. Once I had an aisle seat while flying over the Grand Canyon on a clear day and missed the view completely. True story. Another downside is the frequent disturbances that you'll encounter sitting in an aisle seat. Other passengers will probably bump into you, and the service cart might also bump into you. And even though we're just talking about economy class here, not lie-flat business seats or anything like that, you could say that it's even harder to sleep in an aisle seat than a window seat because there's nothing to lean on. And then of course there's the downside of not being able to control the window shade. You'll be at the mercy of whoever is sitting in the window seat, so that could be a bit annoying. Now, I've conveniently left middle seats out here because I've just never met anybody who prefers the middle seat. I mean, you could speculate that 2 armrests are better than 1, or that having 2 neighbors would give you more of a chance to meet somebody new on the plane, but I'm going to go ahead and say that less is more when it comes to choosing plane seats. And really the worst part about sitting in a middle seat is that it's a form of suffering that's usually easily avoidable. But if you are that person that prefers middle seats in economy, I'd really love to hear why. And I'd like your autograph, because you're probably the only person on Earth that feels that way. That's gotta be a Guinness World Record or something. But fine, there is some good news about middle seats too. You could often fly on a plane that just doesn't have them. Or at least a plane that has a lot less of them. Now, if you're not super into knowing all the different types of aircraft, bear with me here. There's a big reason that you might actually change your mind on that. In essence, all commercial planes are either narrow body or wide body. Narrow body planes have 1 aisle, while wide body planes have more than 1, so 2. You could basically say that most wide-body planes are a little bit more comfortable than narrow-body planes to fly in economy. And most often you'll find wide-body planes operating long-haul flights. But stuff like legroom and cabin design can differ a lot from airline to airline and airplane to airplane. But sometimes you will see wide-body planes operated on shorter flights. And most of the time it's a pretty safe bet to assume they'll be a little more comfortable than a narrow-body plane when you have a choice. But there's still more to it. Everything we've been considering till now applies best when traveling solo. The thing is, I almost always travel with my wife, and a lot of aircraft feature rows of 2 instead of 3 seats in economy. So I always try to fly on those types of airplanes. The most common ones to look out for are 767s and A330s when it comes to wide-body planes. And then for narrow-body planes, really small jets like Embraers will almost always have 2-2 seating. And then the new A220s feature one side of the plane with only 2 seats in a row. Plus, both Qatar Airways and British Airways have part of the upper deck of their A380s in a configuration with 2 seats available in economy as well. There's definitely more planes we could add to this list, so just drop a comment if you want to point out any other aircraft that are ideal for 2 people traveling together. But okay, sometimes none of those aircraft are operating the route that you need to fly. And when it's unavoidable to fly on a plane that only features rows of 3 and 4 seats, we often end up choosing the window and middle seats. So to try to be fair, we take turns, but there's a really big difference between being surrounded by 2 strangers and sitting next to someone you're traveling with. Oh yeah, and if you're finding this video useful, make sure to hit the like button. But we haven't even got to the good stuff yet, so let's talk about why the window seat is king, or queen. I mean, pretty much the only time I wouldn't choose the window seat is when I'm sitting next to someone that I'm traveling with. But a lot of people choose the window seat because they think it's better if you plan to sleep on the plane. But honestly, I find attempting to sleep in any economy seat very counterproductive. Basically, you're guaranteed to get really low quality rest, if any. And at least as I see it, it's better to try to spend time in economy class being productive than failing at sleeping. But I'm sure some of you will argue with me on this, and please do. That's what the comments section is for. But really, the only time I've gotten a decent rest in economy class is when there's a whole row of 3 or 4 seats open and I can spread out on them. And since airlines don't generally try to make a business strategy out of flying around empty planes, the chances of finding 3 or 4 empty seats next to each other on a plane are pretty slim. So for me, it's not about sleeping, but rather the unbeatable benefits of having a sense of space and access to amazing views. But now that we've looked at window seats and aisle seats in depth, let's get a little bit more specific. Not all window or aisle seats are the same, as in some are better than others. Sitting towards the front of the economy cabin has a lot of benefits, even if for some reason you prefer the aisle seat. And in the very front you'll find bulkhead seats, which can be a nice selection. They usually have a ton of legroom because there's a wall in front of them, and most of the time the seats still recline. But they usually don't have standard armrests and can be a little bit less wide than other seats. And the emergency exit rows can also be a good option. But again, some of them will be tighter than other seats and they may not have recline. But any regular old economy seat in the front is good in the sense that you'll likely be able to deplane before the people sitting in the regular old seats in the back. That is, unless your flight also lets people exit from the back. And then there's the whole issue of overhead bin space, which is always worth keeping in mind. The thing is, the earlier you board, the more likely you are to find empty overhead bin space. So this just depends on the boarding process that your airline uses. If you have status with the airline and get to board early, then this most likely isn't much of a factor. But if the airline's boarding front to back, you'll have a higher chance of getting that bin space if you board earlier. But on emptier flights, the front sections of the economy cabin often tend to get a little more booked up. So when that's the case, a seat to the back of the plane could be nicer. But every time I've ever asked the flight attendant to switch seats within the economy cabin, they've said yes. So you could probably just head to the back after boarding anyway. Oh yeah, and if you're sensitive to turbulence, it's worse in the back, so sit towards the front. Wow, it looks like the front is usually a lot better. But there is one other thing that can happen in the front. You know how babies and little kids have to fly too? Well, often airlines have the baby bassinets in the front of economy class. So when sitting in the front, just keep in mind that there might be some noise to plan for. Now the front seats are sounding pretty good, but what about the best side of the airplane to sit on? That's definitely worth considering too. And the main reason for this is that during day flights, one side of the plane will have the sun shining down on it. And that can get hot regardless of how much air conditioning there is. I find this to be especially noticeable on newer aircraft like Dreamliners that don't have traditional window shades. So say you're flying from London to New York. If you don't want to sit on the sunny side of the plane, then the right side is the best. And then I usually think about the route I'm flying and which side will have better views. But flight routes aren't set in stone, so that's maybe not as big of a consideration. Another thing that will impact the seat you choose is the fee you might have to pay to select it. In short, airlines are making a killing charging for seat selection these days. Assuming you're not flying on a budget airline, then the best strategy is usually to select the best seat that you can get for free. Then when it comes time to check in, you can adjust it if there's a better seat available. This whole process differs so much from airline to airline that I'm not going to go any more in depth here. But feel free to share your experiences or ask questions in the comments. But on the topic of choosing the best seat, I've got to be as transparent as possible here. There's definitely one case where the window seat is way worse than the aisle seat and you just can't avoid it. Sometimes the window seat has no window. So while my favorite seat is a window seat, usually on the not sunny side towards the front, there are fake window seats to watch out for. And to know which window seat you'll be getting is as easy as looking up the seating chart for your flight. Some airlines have their own seating charts that tell you if there's no window, no recline, or whatever else. But there are websites dedicated to showing you any seating chart in one place. And the one that I find to be the best to use right now is Aerolopa. You just head to the site, click on your airline, then the aircraft type, and that's about it. Now, in a previous video, I went over Seat Guru, which is also a useful website for looking up seating charts. But over time, I got plenty of comments that Seat Guru isn't as good as it used to be. And that seems to be increasingly true as time goes by. Seat Guru is no longer updated, and it's now missing quite a few newer seating charts. But Aerolopa sometimes lacks the insight that Seat Guru provides when it comes to smaller details. So if Aerolopa isn't giving you the information that you need, then it's still worth checking Seat Guru to see if they don't have more information. But the best possible way to get a feel for which seats to select is to see them for yourself. And I've got some economy class reviews for you where I try out a few different seats. So if you want to get a little bit more hands-on, watch those next. But thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.